in some ways the film was really personal, script-wise, but also it's almost like a document about the process of making it, in a sense, like just how we were all together, and Stacey and I were friends, and I was living at Stacey's house with her for a while, and we were kind of all just bouncing around, and that's why there were cringe-worthy moments for me as well. But then I think, well, you know, I was 20 when I started writing it, and I was 23 when it got made, and that's what gives it a certain kind of honesty, and a lot of the artifice in it comes from, I just wasn't a good enough writer yet, or a sophisticated enough writer yet to sort of cover my tracks. Like, I know what she needs. I mean, like, I know, I'm sorry.
No, you're right. And I filmed that too. And I said, yes, that's the tape. Print it.
It was great. It was great.
Still hard. But you know, that is the other side of it, I think, too, is when I look at it, that there's a certain lack of cynicism in the movie that I was like, it really does have to wear its heart on its sleeve.
That's what keeps it.
That's what's interesting to see, you know, that, oh, you really just were putting it out there in that way.
Look, before the wonderful people at Universal took us on, I believe that the three of us went on a scout paid for by the state of Texas and stayed in like some Best Western to scout because we were going to make the movie for $4 million, and then we got the call that Winona was in because we thought you were going to go off and go back to the show or do something, and
Got canceled. Had no other option.
And then, you know, Universal stepped in, and so it was this sort of very independent studio film. It was an odd mix, but we were ready to do, I mean, we didn't shoot in that many days. It was
42.
Yeah.
And a small note, but in the beginning, when Ethan Hawke gets the phone number from the girl he slept with, that's when he's over.
So I want to go back to the idea of cynicism and the fact that the movie does wear its heart on its sleeve, which is really interesting because when it came out, the buzz about it, the way it was received in the marketplace was that it was portraying young adults as being very cynical and approaching life with this sense of irony. But then when you watch the movie now, it is not nearly as ironic as culture has become.
Yes, yeah, I found that interesting too, that everybody's sort of very much, I mean, just that you know, it's this love story, it's sort of a very traditional love story.
I mean, if you watch Jon Stewart, the news is not ironic. So in the whole culture, at that time, was more specific to the generation.
But I guess what I like to see in movies is there's something that you're able, even if it's couched in irony, that there's something heartfelt and real there. I think it's what people, why you go to the movies, want to feel something. So, I mean, that's always like an inner sort of struggle that I have, I think. Just because you don't want to be cheesy, which I felt like sometimes I'm on the cheesy side of it, but it's interesting that it actually aired that way more than the other way.
Right, and it wasn't, nobody realized that at the moment.
I didn't.
Let's turn it back to the audience here for some more questions.
When you guys Can you hear? Okay. When you guys began the process, did you have these actors in mind to play the characters, or any of the actors in mind?
just Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller reminds me.
Yeah, and then we. I mean, you had me in mind? No, you didn't have me in mind.
You had you in mind. No, turned it down before. Once you came on board and the character was reconceived, we all said you had to play the part. And ironically, the harder thing in hindsight was, remember the one meeting with the studio head who shall remain nameless, who had no problems with you being a first-time director, but only wanted to know why we weren't going to talk about other people for the part. No, we only wanted you to play the part. And Winona came on board and was sort of our little, she got the movie greenlit. And
she really embraced the movie. I mean, she read it and loved it, and she's the reason why the movie got made, really.
She suggested Ethan.
She got me off some costume.
Yeah, it was the first contemporary. She had just done Age of Innocence, right? Or something.
And the other one was around Street, the House of, I can't remember, but yeah, she just wanted to.
She wanted to play a contemporary character and her age.
And she liked this down to earth.
And Ethan suggested Steve Zahn. We all went to go see a theater performance, Jonathan Mark Sherman's play Sophistry, and saw Steve in the play and then gave him the part. But yeah, that's,
Yeah, and then we just auditioned a lot of people, and I didn't work with engineers.
yeah, and asked for a lot of favors. You know, the,
Making a movie like that, even in the studio system, wasn't much different than it is making a movie today. Now you're trying to get favors from your friends, actors, you can get the financing. What's different now is I think it's the studios don't finance these type of films directly. They're financed independently. They come to Sundance and they find a buyer. That's how the business has changed. The movies are still being made.
I can think of another thing that makes me cringe.
Bring it.
For some reason, I decided that it would be perpetually dusk all the time in the apartment.
that's just the time that she would finish light every day. The movie's beautiful though. Emmanuel Lubezki did an incredible job.
But it is dusky a lot.
That works for me. I think we referred to it as romantic realism at the time.
And then there was the scene where they kissed by the fountain, that because the fountain was so loud, we had to loop the entire scene, and I really regret that.
I think also a difference about why.
I mean, if I was an actor, that would have killed me, because seriously, I made them loop that entire scene, which was like this big scene that was
And the wall of
emotional,
water.
which is really hard for an actor to do. To have to go in and do all your lines again, and it never sounds real, and it never sounds as good, and you never can get a performance as good. So
I actually remember how hard that was on the
Yeah.
mixing stage.
so also you have the waterfall in the background. So I'd like to go back and reshoot that scene.
Now you've got a public apology, I'm sure it's cool. Anybody else? Over here?
Mike?
Should I wait for Mike?
I think there's somebody back here.
Yeah. What I'm most curious about is the integration of the documentary footage with traditionally shot camera footage. What was the thought process on that, and what made you choose when to insert pieces where and why?
Well, I mean, the whole sort of core of the story is this documentary that she's making about her friends, and that's the interesting thing that I think really dates the movie in terms of where we are now. That you said YouTube, it's really true. This movie, the whole story wouldn't exist now, because if she wanted to make a documentary about her friends, she'd just make a documentary about her friends, and she would post it and edit it on her computer and let people discover it and not have anything. It's changed so much. So at that time, the idea of access to media, you couldn't go through the computer, and you couldn't just, it was less direct, and filmmaking tools were less available. So that was an important part of the movie, was her home video footage, and we just wanted it to look, wanted it to look like real video, so we shot on real video.
We shot it on beta because I think the high def video had just come out and it looked too good. It just looked like poorly lit film.
Right.
We actually then did a lot of tests.
And yeah, I mean, there was no DI happening at that time, digital intermediate, so you couldn't, I just saw this great documentary making Jaws, where they talked about how they would spend half a day waiting for a boat to leave the horizon because they couldn't take it out digitally, and it's a real thing, and so that's changed the process so much in terms of everything and how that would look and all of it. So we had to be much more aware of that, how the video would transfer to film. We had to do the tests and print it out to film to see what it would look like. Because all the optical effects are actual optical effects, they're not done on the computer, like dissolves and things like that. And I feel really lucky that I had a chance to edit a movie on film, because it was literally the very end of when the people were being really allowed to do that. And it just changes the process. And if I can make another Steven Spielberg reference, he once said that he liked editing on film, even when he could edit digitally, because the time that it took for the editor, first of all, to think about making the cut, because the editor had to literally go and cut the film and splice it together, and find the little short-end piece that they took out before, and it would take like 10 or 15 minutes to try and edit of a certain scene. And he said he liked that amount of time because it gave him time to think about it, and you think about it more before you actually make the cut. And that process is totally gone now because you just do it instantaneously.
Right, there's a reason quick cuts.
Yeah.
After.
And even now, look at the pace of this movie, and the pace of this movie, feels a slower pace than movies in the last,
Not just editing, but remember printing takes? Remember the day where they were like, man, you're printing too many takes?
Yes, because you have to choose which takes you want to actually print to look at. And they get mad if you print too much because then it costs more film. Now that doesn't exist anymore.
I think you guys, you're selling.
What's that?
So Quentin still shoots on film.
Does he? Well, it shoots on film, but
Prince, watch Dailies.
oh, watch this on film. Well, he's Quentin Tarantino.
Yes, the last movie trailer in Hollywood.
It's still the 90s for me.
Oh, I think you guys are selling yourself short, Ben, I think anyway you are, because it's true that the movie wouldn't necessarily be made the same way now, because she would just put her thing on YouTube, but it also prefigured the whole idea of people in their 20s wanting to document everything, the most mundane things about their lives, which we see, daily now on Facebook. So,
Yeah, people plan their lives, fascinating.
We all just found Helen's life fascinating.
I think, one of the major differences I have to say that as far as a movie like this getting made today is a movie with a female protagonist, and that's, with the exception of something like Bridesmaids, you don't really see that.